has ever one of my colleagues made an address here in this room? I don't know, I don't think so. Which means that at this point in time, I'm somewhat of an endangered species. In particular, endangered species. In particular, because I have been asked to advise you, so to speak, this morning about thinking, about possible thinking traps, about how decision making and the way you select your own preferences and choices might be governed by processes of which you are not conscious of. Which means that not only am I, as a psychologist, an endangered species here, but also that I'm, in the next 50 minutes or so, try to use the expression, screw up a little bit with your brain. And if I'm successful, then in the end, when you leave this room, you are somewhat more confused than when you entered it. By the way, one of my own professors said once to us, before we left the university and spread our wings out over the globe, he said, never accept a position as an advisor. And then he used to tell us the following story as a kind of metaphor. He said, imagine a beautiful day, somewhere in the morning, a very beautiful landscape. And there's this shepherd sitting under a tree, casket on his head, and he's eating his lunch. And far away, his herd is grazing, his herd of sheep. And while the shepherd is sitting there in this idyllic landscape, at a certain moment he sees that a kind of cloud of dust and other particles rolls into his direction and comes to a halt about 50 meters before him. And out of this cloud comes a SUV. You know, that's a kind of car that everybody wants to have today, but nobody really needs. And out of this SUV steps a guy who is being dressed more or less the same way I am dressed this morning. He stretches his hand out. He sees the landscape, he sees the herd, he sees the shepherd, and he says, beautiful shepherd, and what a beautiful flock you have over there. And the shepherd does not react. Then a silence passes. And then at a certain moment, the guy walks up to the shepherd and said, listen shepherd, standing here and your flock all over there, if I can tell you how many sheep you have exactly there, can I have one? Takes some time and then the shepherd lifts his shoulders and said, you go ahead sir. So the guy walks around his shift, opens the back door, takes out a small table and a small chair and a laptop, opens the laptop, sits down and starts to type. And after about half an hour, he stands up and says, shepherd, I'll tell you exactly how many sheep you have over there. You have 1,553 sheep. Again, a silence ensues. The shepherd reacts like this and says, okay, sir, go ahead, grab one. And the guy walks up to the flock, grabs an animal, and drags the animal with him to his car, opens his back door, pushes the animal in the back door back. Then he takes his table and his chair, puts him in the back side of the car, steps behind the wheel, guns the motor. Right at the moment he wants to drive away, he hears somebody knocking at his window. And he looks to the left and there is the shepherd, who looks at him under his coat. And the son, because the shepherd thinks that you still do it that way with your window. And the guy puts his window down. And the shepherd looks him into the eye and said, sir, if I tell you what your profession is, can I have my animal back? The guy looks at him like, okay, go ahead, what is my profession? And the shepherd points at him and said, sir, you are an advisor. And the guy is really surprised, almost shocked. That's right, how do you guess? Well, said the shepherd, very simple, 3 things. First of all, you came here without being invited to. Second, you told me what I already knew myself. And third, you don't know nothing. Give me my dog back. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I promise you, I have been invited here this morning. Whether for the rest of the 4 or 5 minutes I have to share something with you that you either already know already for a long time or not, we have to decide afterwards. Also, whether I have any expertise about the area where I'm going to talk with you about this morning. Okay. I have been asked to explore with you certain characteristics of the human brain, which is actually very much my field of research and expertise. And one of the very enchanting characteristics of our present knowledge with regard to the human brain is that while we thought for a long time, actually for centuries, that the human brain, particularly in the psychological sense of the word, is a tabula rasa. You can, so to speak, write into it whatever you like through education or raising or whatever. We now know that that is not true at all. Not only from a physiological or a neurochemical, but also from a psychological point of view. This brain is in many ways pre-programmed. A lot of patterns here that we gradually start to discover, both in terms of their function, their location, but also in terms of the pros and cons of them. And that has opened a completely new field of research, which has led to, I'll show you that in a minute, for example, to 2 Nobel Prizes. 2 psychologists who received the Nobel Prize for their work on what is called the pre-programmed psychological patterns that the human brain becomes. What I'd like to do is this morning to explore that a little bit with you and do some small experiments with you if you allow. But before we're going to do that, I think it is of importance to just practice a little bit with you with regard to the small device that you got. If everything went well, you all got a clicker, as you call it, a small gadget. You all have that one? Okay. Now, we're going to use them during this presentation, but really we have to know whether you are more or less versed in using it. So let's do some few exercises with it before I'm really going into the content part of the presentation. Okay. I'm going to ask, there is something wrong here.